Alright, we're back in Master Duel. This is going to be the last video where we're going to talk about how to spend your gems as a free-to-play player, which cards to craft. We're going to talk about trap cards today. Now, if you're a Duel Links player or you come from the TCG from a long time ago or you have never played the game at all, trap cards are not what they used to be. Only a few topping deck lists in competitive tournaments see trap cards being played nowadays. But there is one trap card, which is Infinite Impermanence, that you definitely want to craft for your competitive decks anyway. And there are a couple of other cards that are probably going to see a lot of play in the side decks once the best of 3 format comes to Master Duel, which I'm fairly confident will eventually happen. Alright, the first card we have is Dimensional Barrier. I believe Dimensional Barrier is an important card to craft because it will become very important in just about a month or 2 months once they release Burst of Destiny. Burst of Destiny has a new archetype that is called Sword Soul. Now, if you're not familiar with that archetype, it's a crazy archetype that has impacted both the OCG and the TCG meta game equally as much. So if it comes to Master Duel, it will definitely be a game-breaking archetype. A lot of people will be on it, and you want to have Dimensional Barrier because it's a synchro archetype. This card reads, you can declare a monster card type, so any of these, and then for the rest of the turn, neither player can special summon monsters of the declared type. Also, all the monster effects are negated of those types on the field. You can call synchro versus them when you go first, and they cannot do anything usually. Or maybe not anything, that's maybe a bit too much, but they are very highly hindered to be able to play. So that's why you need Dimensional Barrier probably in a month or 2 from now on. Evenly Matched is a very, or at least for a time, it was a very staple going second card. Not so much nowadays because every deck puts up negations like crazy. But at the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, you can put this card from your hand to the field and your opponent has to banish all their cards except for one, pretty much. So you use this as a going second card and your opponent loses all the advantage they facilitated. That's sort of the idea behind it. Of course, there are negations in the game, so you're probably going to have to bait their negations first and then somehow have no cards on the field and activate this later. In certain formats, like actually right now in the TCG, where there are not so many decks that end on negations, but they rather end on different interruptions, like destroying your opponent's cards or banishing them or interacting with them in any other way, a card like this becomes a lot better. Also, if you play in a format where a lot of Eldritch is running around, like in Master Duel right now, Evenly Matched is not too bad. Even though they can obviously Solemn Judgment that, it's still not a bad card to have for sure. It's also only in the super rare slot. The most important trap to have in this game is by far Infinite Impermanence. This is a hand trap. This is not a trap per se, but it's a card you can set that has a nice benefit to it in addition to being a hand trap, right? You target a monster your opponent controls, you negate its effects, and if you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. So obviously, the same as Evenly Matched. If you go second, you open this card, you can negate an opponent's monster's effects immediately the turn they summon it, right? So that's amazing about this card. It has another effect that is also very relevant, especially in Master Duel right now, because everyone's has their auto placement on. So you can abuse this a bit with Infinite Impermanence, because if you negate the opponent's monster, if Infinite Impermanence was not activated from the hand but was set before the activation and activated as a regular trap card, all the spell and trap cards that are in the same column as the Infinite Impermanence are negated for this turn. So there can be situations where you only want to negate a spell and trap and you negate any random monster they control just so you can negate the card in the same column as Infinite Impermanence. So that's a nice upside. Infinite Impermanence, a total staple in the TCG and in the OCG equally. Cards are absolutely nuts. Next, we have Ice Dragon's Prison. So I was not sure if I should put this card on here, but it is a card after all that in the TCG, it saw a reasonable amount of play. You can target a monster in your opponent's grave, special summon it to your field, but its effects are negated. Then you can banish a monster from both players' fields that have the same type as each other. So maybe that's a bit confusing at first, but basically your opponent controls a rock monster. You target a rock monster in their grave, you special summon it to your side, and you banish both. So basically, you get 2 for 1 with this card. You get a DD Crow, and you get a banish from your opponent's field that is non-targeting. Non-targeting, very, very important. So that's the reason this card saw a lot of play in the TCG, even in decks that don't play a lot of trap cards, usually like an Eldritch deck, Subterror, or Altergeist. The next card, or the next cards rather, are the Solemn cards. So you have Solemn Judgment, pay half your life points, negate any card as a counter trap. Solemn Strike, pay 1,500 life points, negate a special summon or the activation of a monster effect, destroy that card. So Solemn Strike and Solemn Judgment are both very good cards. Solemn Strike seeing more play in more decks. There have been formats, actually even I think last year, I think Pure Zodiac played Solemn Judgment and Solemn Strike in the main deck, even though they're not a full trap deck. Will you need them in every deck? No, not at all. Will you side them in most decks? Probably not even. Maybe Judgment, because it can negate something like a Dark Riddle no more that we talked about yesterday in the spell section. But all in all, these are not cards that you're going to want to play in every deck, but still they are crazy good cards in certain decks. And that's sort of the cards we want to talk about here in the trap section, right? In terms of traps, they are S tier. However, Imperial Order is actually a card that sees play disregarding if the deck plays spells or not, or which cards it plays. Imperial Order is a card that people have been shouting to get banned in the TCG for so long at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they will ban it. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Sometime now the list should drop at any moment. But anyway, this is a crazy card. Negate all the spell effects on the field. It's a permanent trap and you only have to pay 700 life points each turn to, you know, keep it on the field. Yeah, this card is nuts. If you go first with your combo board and they activate any of the board breaker spell cards that we've discussed yesterday, just flip Imperial Order and immediately win. There can be only one. This is the best floodgate that exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. At least in my opinion, it sees the most play. Each player can only control one monster of each type. So most archetypes are built in a way where you have a lot of similar types, right? The Thunder Dragon deck that I showed off a couple of days ago uses almost only Thunder monsters. And making it so you can only control one Thunder monster, it makes it incredibly hard for that deck to play, and many decks are suffering from that. So there are decks like the Invoke Dogmatica deck that can abuse this card because they only play different types. So all the invoked monsters, for example, are their machines, their fairies, their warriors. So they can control a lot of different types, so they can abuse this card. And if you play something like Invoke, this is a card that you definitely want to own for sure. But also other decks, of course, you have to look at your deck and decide whether or not you need this card or not, or maybe it's something worth playing. All right, that was it for the mini 3-part series. I genuinely hope you enjoy your time on the channel. I'm having a lot of fun doing these Master Duel videos and sort of just spreading information. I see a lot of new players in the comments and subscribing to the channel, so I don't know, that's just really heartwarming to see. And other than that, yeah, I just hope you have a great day and enjoy the game, have fun with it, build your favorite decks, and I will see you in the next video. See you.